Imagine a world where the sun does not just set, but rather deletes the very possibility of safety from the horizon. For hundreds of thousands of years, the ancestors of humanity lived in a state of total biological submission to the random violence of the atmosphere. Survival was a matter of scavenging the leftovers of a storm, a desperate race to catch a flickering ember before the rain or the wind reclaimed it for the void. Before this single mechanical discovery, we were essentially prisoners of the sky, tethered to the rare gift of a lightning strike just to survive the freezing bite of the night. But everything changed when we engineered the flint spark, an innovation that represented the absolute first instance of portable technology. By mastering the specific geometry of iron sulfides and microcrystalline silicates, we did not just make fire, we decoupled human survival from the elements forever. You might think fire was an accident of primitive luck, but prehistoric ignition was actually a feat of high-level engineering that required a deep understanding of material science. We are dismantling the precise friction mechanics behind the flint and pyrite strike to show how ancient humans stopped chasing wildfires and started controlling the very energy of the universe. What if I told you the foundation of every modern gadget in your pocket started with two stones and a specific geometric angle discovered 400,000 years ago? This is the story of the first tool that defined our species and allowed us to step out of the shadows of the food chain to become the masters of our own destiny. To understand the magnitude of this breakthrough, we must first look at the sheer rarity of the minerals that made it possible. Archaeologists at the Barnham site in England have uncovered evidence that early Neanderthals were sourcing iron pyrite from distant locations and bringing it back to their hearths. This mineral, often dismissed as fool's gold, was actually the most valuable material on the planet because it contained the secret to on-demand heat. The secret lies in the chemical composition of iron disulfide, a mineral that exists in two distinct geometric forms: pyrite and marcasite. While pyrite is more common, marcasite is the superior engineering choice because its crystal lattice is more unstable and prone to shattering into highly reactive shards. Our ancestors had to possess the mineralogical intuition to tell these two stones apart just by looking at their dull, weathered exteriors. They were not just looking for rocks. They were looking for energy storage units that could be activated by the mechanical application of force. The discovery at Barnham pushes the mastery of fire back 400,000 years, suggesting that even early hominins were capable of complex technological planning. This was not a one-off accident, as geochemical tests show that these early humans were returning to the same hearths and lighting fires repeatedly over generations. By bringing non-local pyrite to these sites, they proved that fire was no longer a gift from the heavens, but a curated part of their toolkit. They had effectively externalized the sun, carrying the potential for life, giving warmth in a small leather pouch tucked into their belts. This transition from a passive scavenger of fire to an active engineer of ignition is the single most important event in the history of human intelligence. It required the ability to see the invisible relationship between a mechanical strike, a chemical reaction, and a biological necessity. Every time they struck that flint, they were performing a microscopic act of high-level chemistry that would eventually lead us to the internal combustion engine. Let us look at the anatomy of the spark itself. A microscopic thermal event that occurs in less than 1,000th of a second. When the sharp, brittle edge of the flint impacts the pyrite, it does not just hit the surface, it performs a high-speed shearing action. This shaving is so thin that its surface area is massive compared to its tiny volume, making it extremely sensitive to the oxygen molecules in the surrounding air. This is a pyrophoric reaction, where the freshly exposed iron atoms react so violently with oxygen that they release enough heat to reach 1,000 degrees Celsius. If the strike angle is even a few degrees off, the flint will simply crush the pyrite into useless dust instead of creating a viable shaving. Ancient humans had to master the striking geometry of 45 degrees, a precise angle that maximizes the shearing force needed for ignition. They were effectively performing a three-dimensional physics calculation in their heads, accounting for the grain of the stone and the moisture in the air. But the spark is only half the battle, as it is far too small and short-lived to ignite a log of wood on its own. The secret to capturing this energy was the use of specialized tinder like amadou, the inner layer of a shelf fungus that has been prepared into a felt-like material. When a 1000-degree spark lands on these fibers, it creates a microscopic ember that the human must then nurture with their own breath. This act of blowing on the ember is a delicate oxygen management process, providing enough fuel for combustion without blowing the fragile ember away. By mastering this process, our ancestors achieved the first transition from chemical energy to thermal energy on demand, a feat that predates the invention of the wheel by hundreds of millennia. They were the first engineers to hack the chemistry of the Earth's crust to serve their own biological needs. The material science required to identify the best stones was so sophisticated that it included the knowledge of how to heat-treat minerals to change their mechanical properties. They were not just using rocks, they were refining them, transforming raw earth into precision instruments of survival. This level of technical sophistication implies a long history of trial and error, a prehistoric research and development program that spanned thousands of generations. They had to pass this knowledge down through complex language and observation, creating the first schools of engineering around the flickering light of the hearth. The flint and pyrite kit was the most important possession any human could own, a portable life support system that allowed us to conquer the planet. By carrying this technology, we effectively decoupled our success as a species from the local climate, turning the entire world into a habitable zone for humanity. But the impact of the flint spark went far deeper than just warmth and light. It fundamentally rewired the human body and the human mind. This is the expensive tissue hypothesis. The idea that by using fire to pre-digest our food, we freed up the massive amount of energy required to grow our brains. Raw food is a metabolic burden, requiring hours of chewing and a massive digestive tract to extract enough calories to survive. But a cooked meal is an energy bomb, providing a massive surplus that our ancestors invested directly into the hardware of intelligence. We are quite literally the species that fire built, an organism that has become biologically dependent on a technological intervention just to maintain its own reproductive fitness. But the twist is not just biological, it is social. Before the mastery of the spark, the setting of the sun meant the end of the day, a time to hide in the shadows and wait for the dawn in silence. But fire created social time, an extra 4 hours of wakefulness, where the primary activity was not hunting or gathering, but talking. This firelight niche allowed us to develop the higher orders of theory of mind, the ability to imagine what others are thinking and feeling. Around the hearth, we transitioned from functional animals to storytelling humans, creating myths and legends that bound us together into large, complex societies. The spark did not just light the night, it lit the imagination, allowing us to envision worlds that did not yet exist and then work together to build them. Every time we look at the glowing screen of our phones at night, we are merely reliving the ancient ritual of the firelight niche, seeking connection in the darkness. We are still those same creatures, huddling around a source of artificial light, sharing our stories to keep the cold indifference of the universe at bay. The first portable technology was not a tool for making things, but a tool for making us. Today we live in a world where energy is so invisible and ubiquitous that we have forgotten the engineering required to summon it. We are surrounded by the descendants of the flint spark, from the piezoelectric crystals in our lighters to the silicon wafers in our computers. But if all of our modern infrastructure were to vanish tomorrow, how many of us would know how to find the right iron sulfide nodule in a pile of river stones? We have achieved total mastery over nature. Yet we have become more vulnerable than ever because we have outsourced our survival to a machine we no longer understand. The ancient engineers of Barnham did not have electricity or metal, yet they possessed a profound intimacy with the physics of the earth that we have lost. They knew that survival was not a right, but a constant act of engineering, a rhythmic negotiation between the hand and the stone. As you sit there in the glow of your screen, take a moment to look at the stones beneath your feet and wonder what secrets they are still hiding from you. The first portable technology is still here, waiting for the right strike to bring it back to life. If you found this exploration into the deep history of our species profound, consider subscribing to NAFMOS to join our circle around the digital hearth. Go find your own spark and never stop questioning the ordinary.